The fate of the nation. We have a number of issues when it comes to the whole debate between Yitzchak and Rivka. The reason we have these issues is because this section, which defines us as a people, the Perek Chav Zayin and Perek Chav Ches of Sefer Bereishis, of course the end of Parshas Toldos, the issues that they struggle and deal with are the issues that ultimately we deal with. And it's been a great source of anti-Semitism. The famous line, "Don't Jew me, hey, stop Jewing me." And where do they point to? They point to how Yaakov and Rivka took the financial bracha, took the brachos from Esav. Is that really the case? Let's ask a number of questions, a number of very serious questions. Number one is, is there some hocus pocus about a bracha? If Yitzchak assumes that this is Esav, then why in the world, when he finds out that it's Yaakov, there's nothing magical about a bracha. It's no different, for instance, than engaging in a kinyan, a financial relationship. If I say that I'm selling you a V8 and it turns out to be a V4, there's a term called mekach tos. The whole deal was done under false premises. It's not a deal. If I'm marrying Susan and it turns out to be Rivka, that's not a marriage. The whole assumption of the marriage is I was a marriage to Susan, not to Rivka. So again, if the bracha was done under assumptions that this is Esav and it turns out to be Yaakov, it's not a bracha. That's question number one. Question number two, when Rivka tells her son Yaakov, go in there and do what I tell you to do, he doesn't say, I can't do that, it's dishonest, it's wrong. What's his response? What happens if father, ulai yumusheni avi? What happens if father feels me? My skin is much softer. It's not as hairy as Esav's. Vayisi kim tateya be'enav. I'll be like a trickster in his eyes. He's not upset about doing it, about engaging in the activity. He's concerned about what? He's concerned that he'll get caught in the act. Well, you know what? In 20 minutes from now, in a half an hour from now at most, Yitzchak's going to figure it out. So you're not concerned that Yitzchak's going to figure it out in a half an hour from now, but you are concerned that while you're there in the tent serving him the meal, receiving the bracha, then you will be caught. What is that? Another question. One thing is very clear, the Beis Halevi and many Achronim say this, that there's two very distinct brachos. When it came to the Birkas Avram, which is chapter 28, Psukim Gimel, Dalet, Hey, the Birkas Avram, that there was no debate. That's very clear was given to Yaakov. Yaakov, after everything was found out, Yaakov, before he's sent to marry one of his cousins, to go off to Syria, to Haran or to Aram, and marry hopefully one of his cousins, he's given the Birkas Avram, which has embedded in it the land of Israel, the spiritual legacy, the intellectual legacy, the whole spiritual legacy of the ethical monotheistic community. Everything that comes from Avram and Sarah, that went through Yitzchak and Rivka, that's going to Yaakov. That there's no debate about. What's the whole debate about? Back in Perek Chav Zayin, in chapter 27. What is the bracha? You're going to receive mital hashamayim umishmanei haaretz, v'rov dagan v'tirosh. The financial, the economic control of the nation. Who will be the one that receives mastery, control, domination over the economy, over the financial legacy of the nation? According to Yitzchak, it's very clear he wants to split it up. The spiritual, intellectual legacy goes to Yaakov, the financial, economic of chapter 27, mital shamayim umishmanei aretz, that'll go to Esav. Rivka, on the other hand, wants everything to go to Esav. Everything in totality. The financial and the spiritual. The question is, what's the debate? Why is it that Yitzchak Dafka specifically wants it going to Esav and not to Yaakov, the financial, economic destiny of the nation? Why is it that Rivka wants everything going to Yaakov? And specifically yes to Yaakov and no and not to Esav? So there's really four questions. With Rivka, why no for Esav, yes for Yaakov? With Yitzchak, why yes for Esav and no for Yaakov when it comes to the mital hashamayim umishmanei haaretz? That's a series of questions. There are more, but let's start the analysis. One thing here is very clear. one thing is very clear, as we've said, like the Beis HaLevi, like others, that everyone agrees that what makes the Jewish people unique, their responsibility, to quote Avram, "L'man asher yitzava es banav es beiso acharav v'shamru derech Hashem," that there's a transmission, a tzava, a transmission of what? Of a lifestyle of the derech Hashem. What is that? Lasos tzedako mishpat baretz. Not just about being monotheists, but translating that monotheism into what? It translates into wholesale, into retail, into commerce, into how we treat each other. Mishpat, of course, is the din, the strict law of how you treat another human being, the responsibilities we have. Tzedakah is going above and beyond that. It's rooted in tzedek, but it's with a hey. Tzedakah goes above and beyond that. That's going to Yaakov. What Yitzchak was saying was the following. Esav is a huge force. He has tremendous talents, tremendous capabilities. Esav is not just Esav. As we know, what does Esav become? Esav emerges into the Roman Empire. What becomes of the Roman Empire? Christianity. Be it to the eastern part of the Roman Empire, Byzantine Christians, the Eastern Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. The western part of the Roman Empire becomes what? That emerges into what we call Roman Catholicism, Western Christianity. Esav's not just like a leaf that after it comes off the tree, it's going to dry up and blow away. Esav is a force to be reckoned with, a major koach. He will produce a force to be reckoned with. And what Yitzchak wants to do is to keep him in the fold. Why does he send Esav on the hunt to come back to him? Because Esav is at his best in a context of kibbud av v'em. We know that he would dress up to service his father and his mother, the way that he treated his father and mother. We also know that Esav is not going to be the man of the library of the Beis HaMedrash. Esav's success will be out in the world, the conqueror. And Yitzchak wants to keep him in the fold. The way to keep him in the fold is not through the Birkas Avram, but it's by supporting Yaakov and his descendants, by maintaining, by controlling society and civilization, the Jewish world, managing it, the politic of it, the economy of it, the finances, where he will achieve and he will grow and have dominance. And that way, that's a reason to give it to Yitzchak, to keep Yitzchak and everything that Yitzchak will produce. Because one thing, if you write off Yitzchak, God forbid, you know what happens. And we have suffered under millennia of what has happened by writing off. I'm sorry, if you write off Esav, I apologize. If you write off Esav, if Yitzchak were to write him off, the consequences are what Rome did to us. The destruction of Judea in 70. The destruction, the major Holocaust that existed for 2 millennia, the defining Holocaust of the Jewish people. The aftermath of the Bar Kokhba revolt, where we lost somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 Jews. What Esav did in the aftermath of the Hadrianic decrees, killing our finest. What Esav has done throughout the millennia. Whether it's the Chmielnicki revolt in the mid-17th century, whether it's what Ferdinand and Isabella did at the end of the 15th century, the Inquisition, the auto de fe in Portugal. What happened to us 70 years ago in Christian Europe at the hands of the Germans, the Polish Catholics, the Ukrainians, the Lithuanians. That's what Esav is capable of if you write him off. And Yitzchak did not want to write him off. Why no to Yaakov? The reason not to give it to Yaakov is because of the great challenge which the Jewish people have succumbed to at different times. Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat from Parshas Azinu. Kochi va'otzem yadi asuli es achayel azeh from Parshas Akev. The great fear that what? That when we are successful financially, when we grow, when we achieve, we lose focus of our mission. Look at our exile here in America. The Jewish people have never had it this good as we've had it in America. And yet, look at our intermarriage rate, our assimilation rate. We lose focus. We lose focus of who and what we are, of what we represent, of what our values are, of what defines us ethically and morally, what defines us philosophically, theologically. That fear of Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat, that great fear, that is the fear that Yitzchak has giving it to Yaakov. What about Rivka? Rivka, on the other hand, How do you give it to Esav? What if it doesn't work? This is the Esav we know is the Esav that's lived at least with his mother and father and has a relationship with his mother and father. What about after we're gone? What about generations from now? What is the great challenge, theological challenge that most people have? It's not the existence of God. It's not Torah Misinai. These are not the great quandaries that most people have when they wrestle with religion. It's the issue of theodicy. It's the issue of how righteous, pious people suffer and are oppressed at the hands of evil, at the hands of heinous, cruel leaders, at the hands of criminals, of barbarians. The great fear of Rivka is tzadik v'ra'lo, rasha v'tovlo, theodicy. You give that bracha to Esav, and it doesn't work? Do you want, for eternity, do you want to have a situation where Yaakov is dependent? We're dependent upon oppressive, cruel, domineering people who are going to manipulate, who are going to treat us in a horrific, terrible way. You want to have a situation like that? You don't want Yaakov to be dependent, not only spiritually and intellectually, but to be financially and economically dependent? That's the reason not to give it to Esav, she says. What's the reason, yes, to give it to Yaakov? Because ultimately, what is the Torah? It's a Torah's Chaim. What's Torah's Chaim? It's a Torah that not only has relevance in a shul, not only has relevance in the world of prayer, it is just as relevant. The Choshen Mishpat is the largest section of the code of Jewish law. Its relevance in wholesale and retail, in marketing, in employee relationships, it's just as relevant there. It's just as relevant in the bedroom as it is in the kitchen. And it's relevant in the kitchen as it is in the shul. It's Torah's Chaim. It's something that was meant to be what? To be engaged, not to be, so to speak, sequestered, quarantined into some corner of the world, into some group or body. But it's what? It's meant to be something that you see the person of religion as a medical professional, as a musician, as a financier, in real estate, in all areas of commerce, in all areas of engaging the world. Not just the rabbi, not just the teacher. And that's why, yes, to give it to Yaakov. Not to have a schism. Not to have two tiers. But it should be one whole, one synthesis, one unity. And that is the debate they have. She realizes she's not going to convince her husband differently. Now, by the way, we are not taking this approach. The Netziv says, you notice that there's a lack of dialogue, that they did not discuss this, that Rivka had a certain reverence for Yitzchak, that she couldn't feel comfortable discussing this. That's one approach. That's not the approach we're taking. We're taking the approach of others, that there was a dialogue, an unmentioned dialogue that existed for years. Hirsch is one of those who says Rivka realizes she can only convince her husband through action. He'll realize that just like he was fooled by Yaakov, so too he's been fooled by Esav. That's the point she's trying to make to her husband. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Don't we have the ethical issues? How could you do this? Look at what Yaakov does. Yaakov does what? He comes in, he speaks to his father. Please, Father, please get up. Father says to him, how'd you come back this soon? Ki hikra Hashem Elokecha lefanai. Through providence, God facilitated that I was able, to have Shem Shamayim Shkura Befiv, to quote Rashi, that's the way that he would speak. Hakol Kol Yaakov doesn't just mean, so to speak, his voice biologically sounds like the voice of Jacob. What does it mean? It means the whole vehicle of expression, the whole ability of articulation, the whole ability of communication. It's a different communication. And when Rashi makes the point, who are you? Father asks his son Yaakov. Yaakov says, Anochi, Esav Bicharecha. Sure, Yitzchak heard, I am Esav, your firstborn. But how did he say it? Anochi, it is I. Esav Bicharecha. Esav is your firstborn. Meaning what? That he showed his father in the context of Esav's world. He's not only an Ish Tam, a man of perfection, in, so to speak, the world of study, the world of the Beis HaMedrash. He can conduct himself, he can live and maintain his dignity in Esav's world. He can deal with an Esav on the street, and yet maintain his integrity, to speak the way he speaks, to conduct himself the way he can conduct himself. That could only be demonstrated. The conversations had taken place for years. Yitzchak had to experience it himself and realize he was mistaken. And what does Yitzchak realize? When Esav comes in after Yaakov is left, it says, Vayecharad Yitzchak charada gedola ad ma'od. He trembled in a great and awesome excessive trembling. Because he realized, some commentaries say he realized he was wrong, he was mistaken about Yaakov and about Esav. Others say no. If you take a look at Rashi, he realizes that what he's doing is he is writing off Esav. And there are ramifications when Esav is written off. I don't mean written off that he wasn't their son. Of course he was their son who they loved and looked after. But written off from being the continuity, the future, the destiny of the monotheistic community. When you write off Esav, by definition, you're opening yourself up to a Roman Empire. You're opening yourself up to what we experienced in medieval Europe. You're opening yourself up to an Inquisition, an auto da fe, the Chmielnicki massacres, the Churban Acharon of the Shoah. That's the charada gedola ad me'od, that he trembled. These are the consequences. But he realized his wife was right. He realized that Rivka was right. How do we know that? Because when Esav says, I'm Esav, that wasn't me, that was my brother. So look at Perek Chav Zayin, Pasuk Lamed Gimel. It's crucial to look at Lamed Gimel. So what does Yitzchak respond to Esav now that he realizes this is Esav and that was Yaakov? He responds the following. Apologize, the pages are stuck. Pasuk Lamed Gimel. Vayecharad Yitzchak charada gedola ad me'od. Vayomer miefa hu hatzad sayid. Who was the one that brought the venison? Vayaveli va'ochal mikol b'terem tavo. And I ate of it. It was a positive experience. I ate of it all. Va'avarcheu, and I blessed him. Now here's the key line. Gam baruch yihiyeh. What does that mean? Gam baruch yihiyeh. After Yitzchak finds out, he says, that's the one who will receive the financial blessing. That's the one who will be the continuity of maintaining not only the spiritual, intellectual, the Birkas Avram, but mital shamayim mishmanei aretz, the financial and economic destiny of our people. Gam baruch yihiyeh. Yitzchak changes. Yitzchak realizes that his wife was correct. Because Yaakov has demonstrated that he can live in Esav's world and maintain who and what he is as a Yaakov. You'll ask, but how can that be done? So Hirsch will say, Rivka needed to demonstrate to her husband that he was mistaken, that he misread both of the brothers. Others will say that we would never ever engage in this. That's why Yaakov in Parshas Vayetze, even though Lavan manipulates and changes the deal 100 different times, Vatechalef es maskorti aseres monim, 100 different times he manipulates and he changes the conditions of the labor contract, Yaakov will never ever resort to this. Why? For financial gain, there's no justification for this. There's no justification for financial gain. But here at stake is the spirit. Here at stake is the future destiny of the nation. It's not about financial gain. It's about what will the nation emerge, what will the Jewish people look like? What will everything that Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka have built, that they've been promised by God that this will emerge into a nation, what will be the shape and definition of that nation? That is what we are dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. And for that, he can do it. Let me make the following comment. We refer to this debate between Yitzchak and Rivka as a machlokes l'shem shamayim. What does it mean, a machlokes l'shem shamayim? So in the end, providence, God, by enabling her to overhear, and by Yaakov being able to come in, and then Yitzchak realizing and changing his decision and agreeing with his wife, that providence facilitated that. But it's not that Yitzchak was wrong. He was wrong. No. This is a machlokas l'shem shamayim, like a Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai. Because Yitzchak's two concerns, what happens if the Jewish people lose their focus and don't play the role of being a mamleches kohanim, of continuing the Birkas Avram, in making their primary focus their own transformation and the transformation of all of humanity, of the ethical and moral standard, and of the theological approach to life of all of humanity. What happens if they lose their course? Vayishman yeshurun vayivat. Kochi v'otzem yadi asu li es hachayil hazeh. Well, we've seen Yitzchak's fears were correct. They've happened. We haven't always kept our focus on the target, kept our eye on the bullseye, so to speak. And the other concern, what happens if you write off Esav? He's not going to dry up and blow away. We've seen that as well. We've seen it all too well, that concern. So in the end, God supported Rivka, and Yitzchak agreed to Rivka. And in the end, we see that you can't split, you can't have a bifurcation. But it's not that Yitzchak's concerns weren't real concerns. And it's not that his issues weren't real issues. Because till this day, when you make a choice, we live with the ramifications of that choice. And yes, this was the right, the correct choice, but there are ramifications. The last point, and this I heard from Rav Michal Birnbaum, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the Mashgiach of Mesivta Tiferes Yerushalayim. Rivka had to do what she had to do. Yaakov had to do what he had to do. And they had to do what they had to do. This was not for financial gain. This was for the future of the nation, the fate and destiny of the nation. But there's a hakpada. The hakpada, Rav Birnbaum, the Mashgiach of Mesivta Tiferes Yerushalayim, said, is that Rivka, at this point, never again will see her son. She's never reunited with Yaakov. She never gets a chance to meet and to live and experience her daughters. She never has a chance to raise her grandchildren. The nation that will come out of Yaakov, she can never experience. She did what she had to do, but there are consequences. I'll give you an analogy. For medical emergencies, we violate Shabbos. We're Mechal Shabbos. Absolutely, it's the right thing to do. But when we're Mechal Shabbos, that sanctity, that awe, that reverence, it's diminished. We have to do it. It's the right thing, and you don't think twice about doing it. But when you're using a phone and carrying a beeper and driving, that's the consequences. You're at a wedding, and the bride is, what do we say, a misafrau, not the most exquisite of women. You don't say, oh, what do you think of her? Isn't she a beautiful bride? You don't tell the truth. No, she's a dog. No, have you ever seen a bride that terrible? No, you don't say that. That's not the way you speak. Kala na'a v'chasuda, the Mishnah in Ksubos in second parak. What a graceful, what a gracious, what a charming bride. You know what? That's your response. Because there's certain values that are greater than truth itself. Shalom is greater than truth itself. We know Aaron, Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom. He violated the truth norm for the sake of peace. And you have to do it. And that's the halacha, and that's proper, and that's our hierarchy of values. But there are consequences. Because that demarcation, that clear, distinct demarcation between emes and sheker, that which is true and that which is false, it gets violated. It gets grayed over. And that's a problem. That's a problem psychological, that's a problem morally, that's a problem in terms of our personality. And there's a hakpada. There's a hakpada when there's a graying, even if it's once or twice, or even if it doesn't happen often. There's a consequence to that. It's not a punishment, it's a consequence. And the consequence, of course, for Yaakov is he never was reunited with his mother. He never could bring his wives, his children to his mother. Part of the consequence is what happened to him, according to the Medrash, what happened to him in terms of what the brothers did vis-a-vis Joseph, how he was fooled, what Lavan did to him with Leah and Rachel. Doesn't mean that he did the wrong thing. Just means there's a consequence to it. That was what Reb Michal Birnbaum Zatzal said. This approach, which is rooted in the Beis Halevi and those Achronim that see a clear demarcation between the Birkas Avram of chapter 28, Psukim Gimel through Hey, and the Mital Shamayim Mishmanei Aretz, the Parak Chav Zayin, chapter 27. This is an idea that Rav Aaron Kahn Zatzal, the great Talmud Chacham, the great Rav in Flatbush, the Talmud Muvhak of Rabbi Yasha Ber Soloveitchik. This is how he took the Beis HaLevi and developed it. And it opens up for us, and it gives us an insight and an understanding as to what the issues were, what was at stake, what the issues were. Not that this is some hocus pocus. Brachas don't happen like that. Obviously, once Yitzchak realizes who that was, now he decides, do I want to give that bracha to Yaakov or not? There are some meforshim, we didn't take that approach, that even say Yitzchak realized that it was Yaakov all along. He realized in the experience when Yaakov was in the tent. That's not the approach that we're taking, but it would not violate the whole approach, the whole development that we're engaged in. These are issues that are Dvarim Ha'om De'Meruma Sha'olam. These are the issues that define not only the fate of the nation, but the ongoing fate and destiny of the nation. The great, great fate as to who will be the continuity and what will the legacy that Avraham and Sarah and that Yitzchak and Rivka started, what will it emerge into? What will it be? What will it look like? Thank you.